Good day, everyone, and welcome to today's Power for Puerto Rico conference call. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. Later, you have the opportunity to ask questions during the question and answer session. You may register to ask a question at any time by pressing the star and one on your touch-tone phone. Please note this call may be recorded, and I'll be standing by should you need any assistance. It is now my pleasure to turn the team's program over to Mr. Luis Miranda. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all for joining us to launch the Power for Puerto Rico Coalition. We have been coming together over the last several weeks, organizations and individuals, because we all understand that it's just not enough to restore Puerto Rico the way it was, but we want a Puerto Rico that it's better after what Hurricane Maria did to the island. We want to make sure that we really focus on comprehensive investments in healthcare, in infrastructure, in workforce development, so that in fact we end up with a stronger local economy. And we want to make sure, and we all agree, that after all of this is done, Puerto Rico ends up with a clean slate from its bankruptcy and its national debt. We'll talk more about what Power for Puerto Rico and our coalition is all about as you meet our members and leaders. I want to start welcoming my son, Lin-Manuel Miranda. We just came from Puerto Rico yesterday, where we spent the last couple of days. Lin-Manuel, if you want to say a couple of words.
Sure. Thank you, Pa. Thanks, everybody, for allowing me to speak for a couple of minutes. I know my voice sounds just like my dad's, so don't be confused. I am so proud and grateful for everything that you're doing as part of the Power for Puerto Rico Coalition, as individuals and organizations, and working hard to provide a voice for Puerto Rico during this time of need. As my dad mentioned, José Calderón, he and I just came back from Puerto Rico yesterday. We went to see firsthand the aid that Puerto Rico is receiving through our Hispanic Federation efforts in 42 of the 78 municipalities so far. We were able to announce grants to nonprofits on the island, so they work hard in building the new Puerto Rico. However, I'm an artist. I'm not an organizer. My first instinct was to write a song. So I also went to Puerto Rico to announce that Hamilton is going to be coming to the island in January of 2019, and I'm coming back to play the role. So we're hoping to sort of thread the needle on two things there, both bring tourism back to the island with this production and have people spending money there, and also provide thousands of affordable tickets to Puerto Ricans on the island. I know that on November 19th, you'll all be at the Unity March in Washington, D.C., to make sure our voices are heard in our nation's capital, where decisions are being made about the future of our island, and we will be there to show our faces y decir presente. So thank you for allowing me to congratulate all of you. Power for Puerto Rico. Adelante. Back to you.
Thank you, Lin-Manuel. I know I also have on the line Congressman Darren Soto from Florida. Congressman, please share a couple of thoughts with us.
Thanks, Luis, and thanks, Lin-Manuel, for having me. We're really excited for the great work that Power for Puerto Rico is doing back in Orlando. You know, there's a lot going on. We know the island is still dealing with a catastrophe of beyond description, with 70% of the folks still without power and nearly as many without cell phone service. 2 weeks ago, we passed a disaster relief package that had $4.9 billion for a loan for the government of Puerto Rico to continue to operate. That loan needs to be forgiven. It was a shame that it had to be that, but we will continue fighting for that. In addition, we got $1.27 billion for food assistance for Puerto Rico as well. That'll be a well-needed infusion. FEMA got a boost of $15 billion, but they're not doing enough down there. We have asked over and over and over to have more air assets, such as helicopters, to be able to do daily airlifts to some of these towns like Guayataca and Utuado that are just devastated out there, and we continue to try to fight to convince this president that Puerto Rico needs to be taken seriously. Also, the rebuild of roads and bridges continues to be way too slow as we push to improve utilities and cell phone service. And, of course, we're finally still reeling from that terrible insider whitefish contract that really, I believe, slowed down the recovery efforts. There's also a big fight with Medicaid because there's about $1.6 billion that's going to be requested per year from Puerto Rico, but it does not look like Congress right now is going to do anywhere near that, and they're requiring a match. So I'm working with my peers, both Congresswoman Velasquez, Serrano, Gutierrez, and others to try to get that funding there without a match as best we can. In my own home state of Florida, we are a host state and proud to have over 90,000, nearing 100,000 of my fellow Puerto Ricans in Florida. We welcome everyone, and we're doing our best with ease of enrollment into school so kids can get back to school quickly. With 2 months of food stamps for folks who arrive. We have a FEMA emergency housing program, but there aren't enough hotels that are participating in it, so we're fighting to get more hotels to get in line on this. We've also requested bipartisan delegation letters to have more funding for our local schools and governments, since we're going over budgets in some of these areas, and we also recently just filed bills to draw down more Medicaid and affordable housing funding to care for these over 90,000 of our fellow Boricua who we're proud to be able to help in our home state, and just appreciate the good work that Power for Puerto Rico is doing and look forward to continuing to do good work together.
Thank you very much, Congressman. It's a pleasure to have you in Congress at this time that it's so important for Puerto Rico that we have a voice in Florida for Puerto Ricans. I want to introduce Archbishop Roberto González Nieves from the Archdiocese of San Juan. Roberto, it's a pleasure having you with us. Please share some of your thoughts.
Well, thank you, Luis. It's been quite a few years since we've seen each other, but I remember well those years in the city, and also a joy to congratulate your son and for all of his success that he has had. He's actually on the front page of El Nuevo Día de Hoy, if you've seen the electronic version. Also on the front page of El Nuevo Día de Hoy, there's the main article is the fact that since the Hurricane Maria, because we went through two hurricanes. The Northeast went through Irma, and then the entire island went through Maria. But the main story is that since Maria, 5,000 small businesses have closed, and that is primarily due to the lack of electricity. And these are, mom and pop businesses. And what is going to happen now as more businesses continue to close? That's one reason why I think what you are doing is so important, to bring the energy, the electricity back in Puerto Rico, because as someone mentioned just before, 70% the homes in Puerto Rico, the businesses, still do not have electricity. I would also add a word of deep, deep gratitude to all of our people in the diaspora who have expressed their solidarity and their solicitude for the people of Puerto Rico. It's been a traumatic experience for everyone on the island, and people are still coming out of a state of shock because it jolted the entire island, its nature, its beauty, and it jolted the people. Whatever else I could probably say, you're probably aware of. So, de corazón, gracias.
Thank you very much, Archbishop, for being with us and doing everything I know you're doing for Puerto Rico in the island and elsewhere. And thank you for your kind words for the diaspora here in the United States. Power for Puerto Rico. It's part of that effort that all of us are doing here in the U.S. I do not know, but want to check to see if Hector Figueroa has joined us.
I'm not Hector, but I'm Evelyn de Jesus from American Federation of Teachers / United Federation of Teachers. ¿Cómo están mis hermanos y hermanas? Y Boricua. I'm on the call.
Thank you very much, Evelyn. I appreciate that. Luis, I think we're going to José Calderón.
Okay. José, Lin-Manuel, and I, as Lin-Manuel mentioned, spent the last several days in Puerto Rico. José Calderón, president of the Hispanic Federation.
Gracias, Luis. Luis, you sound tired, and for good reason. You've been working nonstop, as everybody on this phone has been, because Puerto Rico is a cause that belongs to all of us. Puerto Ricans are our family members, they're our friends, neighbors, fellow Americans, and an indelible part of our nation, right? So what has happened in Puerto Rico is deeply personal to all of us, and really over the past 50 days, we have been working relentlessly to address the many needs of our people on the island. Just to give you an example, and Lynn mentioned this before, the Hispanic Federation has organized hundreds of collection drives to secure emergency provisions for the island. We've established a relief and recovery fund, which has now been supported by over 125,000 individual donors. That's the power of the diaspora, as the Archbishop mentioned. We coordinated now 18 relief aid flights from the States to Puerto Rico, and very proud to say that we've distributed now more than 3 million pounds of food and water to individuals and families on the island. And then the $2.5 million fund that we were there just these past couple of days to announce to support grassroots organizations that are leading efforts around long-term recovery for Puerto Rico, and much more. I say that only with sort of the effect to say this, which I think is really important. As important as that work has been, and it is ongoing, we want to be crystal clear that it is no substitute for a proper federal response to the humanitarian crisis taking place in Puerto Rico. As has already been mentioned by a couple of folks on the call, the response by our federal government to date has been woefully inadequate. It has failed to even remotely care for and serve our American citizens on the island. The Archbishop mentioned this, but the fact is that still an unbearable number of our families and fellow citizens in Puerto Rico remain without electricity, remain without regular access to food, water, medicine, and other things that again, that are just basic necessities for any human beings, and particularly for people that are living in an American territory in the Western Hemisphere. So that the response by the federal government has been wholly unacceptable, and we are very, very proud to join this effort, Power for Puerto Rico, to speak loudly as one and tell Congress and this administration that they have a legal and moral responsibility to help Puerto Rico fully recover and heal. And that's something that's going to take billions, in fact, tens of billions of dollars to do so. We have been very clear that we need a Marshall Plan by our government to meet the short-term, mid-term, and long-term needs of our fellow American citizens in Puerto Rico. We intend to work with our congressional allies. We're grateful for Congressman Soto and other congressional members who have really been speaking out in terms of the needs and the woefully inadequate response from the federal government, and, of course, all the community partners that are on this call to advocate every day to make sure that Puerto Rico and our people on the island are treated fairly and equitably. So looking forward to continuing the important work we've started. And as Lynn mentioned, on November 19th, we're going to be marching together in D.C. to make sure that Puerto Rico continues to be elevated in the national discourse. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jose. I know I have online Ana Maria Archila, co-executive director of the Center for Popular Democracy. Ana Maria.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you, everyone. So I'm here with the Center for Popular Democracy, which is a network of community organizations rooted in immigrant communities, African-American communities, Latino communities across the U.S. and in Puerto Rico. And since the season of hurricanes came upon us, we have been working with communities across Texas and Florida, California, and Puerto Rico to support people who are on the front lines, really responding to the climate change disasters that we are experiencing every year, and that we have seen so much this year. When Hurricane Maria landed in Puerto Rico, we immediately went into action to set up a fund that would put money in the hands of community organizations and people who are organizing to not just respond to the most immediate emergency, but to build power and to build community and to advance a long-term vision for justice in Puerto Rico. The hurricane came and devastated the island. When I went to Puerto Rico just a few weeks ago, the trees really tell the story of the sadness of the hurricane. You look everywhere and the trees are without leaves, the trees are without branches, but the trees are still standing, very much like the people of Puerto Rico, very much still shocked by the force of the hurricane, but really most shocked by the disaster that came after the disaster. The reality that the federal government took so incredibly long to stand up and still has not stood up a response that really matches the level of devastation that is taking place. Still to this day, 70% of the island does not have electricity. Still to this day, people have to stand in lines to get ice. People have to stand in lines to get water. The hurricane has lifted the veil of neglect by the federal government, the level of devastation caused by the austerity and the predatory behavior of hedge funds and banks that have taken so many resources from the island, and has lifted the veil also on the incredible strength and resilience and beauty of the people of Puerto Rico, who immediately after the hurricane passed showed up for each other, stood up kitchens in the street so that people could feed each other, because the reality is, like, immediately after the hurricane, no one had enough to just feed their families. No one had enough water, no one had enough ice, no one had enough supplies to just be living in normalcy. People had to rely on each other, and it is in this reliance on each other that they were able to survive the level of neglectful response by the federal government. And so the Center for Popular Democracy has set up the Maria Fund, which is which now has collected close to $3.5 million that are going directly to community organizations on the ground. We know also that the hurricane has created a terrible crisis of migration. In the U.S., we will see close to 500,000 refugees, climate refugees, coming from Puerto Rico to cities across the U.S. So in the U.S., the Center for Popular Democracy, with our partner organizations, will do a lot of work to make sure that people are welcome in cities across the country. We will work with local governments to make sure that they have policies and programs that are able to really support and welcome people in these moments of incredible distress. We will make sure that communities across the country are activated and holding members of Congress' feet to the fire to make sure that Puerto Rico gets the highest level of aid that it deserves and it needs. We will make sure that the Trump administration continues to hear loud and clear the voices of Puerto Ricans, both in the island and in the U.S. We will work to make sure that in these moments of such vulnerability, we don't see investments that are predatory and that result in the privatization of public infrastructure and the disappearance of public schools. We have learned lots of lessons from what happened in New Orleans after Katrina, where public housing basically disappeared, where public schools were wiped out. So we want to make sure that we're working in a deeply coordinated way with people in the island to drive an agenda that allows Puerto Ricans to stay in the place they call home, to have the freedom to move to a place where they can seek safety and economic opportunity, but also have the freedom to thrive everywhere, whether it is in the island, whether it is stateside. So we are very excited to be part of this coalition of powerful PR. We think that this is a moment of tremendous importance and urgency, and also a moment of tremendous opportunity to build a new powerful voice of Puerto Ricans, political voice here in the U.S. and also in Puerto Rico.
Thank you, Ana Maria. I know that we've been joined by Hector Figueroa, the president of 32BJ Service Employees International Union. Hector, welcome.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Hector. This is Luis Miranda. If you can share some thoughts.
Sure. First of all, I want to thank everyone for the incredible work that's been done, and Luis for putting this together. I mean, it's really without any doubt that the effort that has been put by the organizations and individuals on this call and others who may not be part of our conversation right now are making a huge difference at the moment that the federal government, and I venture to also add the local government of Puerto Rico, have not necessarily really met at all the needs of the moment. So I think that without the efforts from organizations like the ones on this call and individuals such as yourself and others, we will be so far behind in what the moment requires for the people of Puerto Rico. But, in terms of us, we have been working at two levels. We have the work of SEIU and the work of a coalition that we have put together, which, I know CPD and others are part of that effort too, that we call Vamos for Puerto Rico, also with the number 4, kind of similar to Power for Puerto Rico. And, the work in SEIU has been very concrete, and I'd be happy to answer questions, but we've been raising money within SEIU. We have been sending staff, mostly healthcare workers and other workers who can help in the constitution on the island of 8 centers that we have put jointly together with our 2 affiliates there. We represent over 30,000 healthcare and school workers in 2 separate locales, and they have set up 6 to 8 centers across the island that are providing healthcare, are providing aid, are connecting with the local authorities and identifying needs in the population. The locals also have participated on mobilization and organizing efforts that we have put right after the hurricane. So we have mobilized through the coalition of Vamos for Puerto Rico, but using the base of membership of SEIU in over 13 cities across the country. We did actions early on October 4th, and we have done actions subsequent to that. We have the capacity to mobilize right now in pretty much all the big cities: Seattle, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, Boston, Hartford, Philadelphia, obviously New York, Miami, Orlando, and many others. Even in Texas, in Houston, we have the capacity, if the need arises, to bring attention to either an issue, a campaign, put pressure on Congress, have local lobbying. So we're very happy with that. That being said, the challenges are enormous. So what we're trying to do is to continue to build a broad network of rapid response, and jointly with CPD and others, we're trying to figure out how we could go far deeper, especially in Florida. Doesn't have to be limited to Florida, but Florida has the largest numbers of climate refugees right now from Puerto Rico and economic refugees from the prior crisis. So we are having organizers on the ground in Orlando, and we are using the existing campaigns of SEIU, particularly 32BJ, of organizing airports in Orlando, Fort Lauderdale, and Miami, to also lend capacity, people, and political work at the local level to welcome the communities, to welcome the Puerto Rican diaspora that is been moving quickly over the last decade, and now it's going to intensify. So we passed in the last few months, we passed a language access bill because a lot of the Puerto Rican migrants, speaks only Spanish. We're dealing now with issues of crowding in the schools and issues of scarcity of affordable housing. And we are not alone in this effort. Unfortunately, people who I would argue have not our best interests at hand, like the Koch brothers and Libre, are also competing with us on the ground in trying to persuade the Puerto Rican community to look at them more favorably. And these are the same people who are blocking in Congress efforts to alleviate the debt service and provide relief money and economic development for the island. We've been calling for a Marshall Plan, meaning that we think we need a comprehensive plan that goes beyond immediate measures. We certainly want to see relief dollars go to Puerto Rico. We want the Jones Act to be delayed. On that, we part ways with other unions who are with the seafarers in their concerns. We feel that those concerns don't override the impact that the Jones Act has on Puerto Rico. So we may be alone, on labor on that, or there are a few other unions that are like us. But we also feel we need a comprehensive strategy that looks at the 4 areas that the coalition has been advocated, the moratorium or cancellation of the debt, but also a sustainable path for economic development in the areas of agriculture, tourism, public education, more affordable housing, and then we need to tend to the energy sustainability as well. So we want to bring this from a labor union perspective where we're very labor friendly, and we think that strategists in Puerto Rico at the moment that are trying to create apprenticeship wages and cutting wages for workers are just going to accelerate migration. We don't think that we're going to restore the island to a level of normalcy by attacking workers, destroying their benefits, and cutting their wages. On the contrary, we need stability in the labor market in Puerto Rico as well. So anyway, this is just a broad stroke, but to sum up, we think that what we can bring to the table is the ability to exercise politics on the ground and politics broadly, and also to bring a level of organization nationwide that I think our community has not experienced for a long time.
Thank you very much, Hector. We heard earlier from Evelyn de Jesus, the Vice President of the American Federation of Teachers, who also joined us. At this point, I will want to open the call. If there's any questions or comments.
So, hi, this is Evelyn. I just want to let you know what we're doing. We have 40,000 members that have affiliated with the American Federation of Teachers, and the teachers have taken a very powerful role. We have distribution centers in 3 places in Puerto Rico, San Juan being one of them, Mayagüez. They're distributing 700 to 1,000 families a day food. We're also partnership with Hispanic Federation with José. Thank you so much, José, and AFSCME. And the goal is Operation Agua with an evangelical group called Operation Blessing. So it's AFT, Hispanic Federation, AFSCME, Operation Blessing come together, and we're calling it Operation Agua. The goal is to distribute 100,000 water filters to households. So the goal is we want to do much more, but right now it's 100,000. I believe they arrived on Tuesday, and this Tuesday they're arriving, and they're going into households. Teachers have set up makeshift schools. Let me just give you some rundown on numbers. 500 schools have opened. 200 to 250 can possibly open. The infrastructure is there. It's just the electrical and the water. We're hoping the water filters, if they do it by household, it's $30 a household. If they do it by municipality, like a couple of households together, it could be $1,500. So we're setting that up. We're doing fundraising everywhere. So now we have 3 distribution centers. The teachers is helping with the cleaning up of schools. I have to tell you, they're also having A lot of labor people, TWU, Teamsters have stayed at the distribution center, and they're the ones cleaning the roads during the hurricane. I think it's the 48th day today. So 500 schools are open as of today. 200 to 215 can open, but it's the issue of cleaning them up and getting them ready. But 300 of them will not open, and they need a whole new. Some pueblos need a whole new infrastructure. It's not safe to open them, so they probably have to be torn down and then rebuild. I don't know if people know, but Secretary DeVos is there today and was there yesterday. Looking at privatization, what they did at New Orleans. So the teachers union is really pushing back and really really meeting with her to let her know that we can open these schools, they can stay public. We just need more funding from Congress and all that. So we have distribution centers. We have Project Operation Agua. We're hoping that we can get more partners to help us because, if houses have filters, they can at least drink some, because people are drinking water from all over, and as you know, the water is contaminated. So they're very light, and we're shipping them and giving them to our longshoremen. People are bringing it directly to the teachers, also la Asociación de Maestros in Puerto Rico, and they are then distributing to pueblos. They're also going by foot and renting some cranes for Utuado because they're saying that they can't get to certain villages in Utuado, certain sections, because there's no road and no bridge. So they're renting, I guess, trucks or whatever, and by rope making a makeshift bridge to get food to certain places that they know that people are still hungry and not getting food. So teachers are on the go. 40,000 of them are up and running, plus we have retirees. And even though, I want you to know, 500 teachers lost their homes. Even though they don't have a place to stay, they're displaced or misplaced. Right now, they're still the leaders of all these municipalities really helping. And in
Evelyn,
New York
thank
State,
you so much. We have to go to
questions
questions before the reporters start to drop off. So thank you so much for joining our call last minute. But we do need to get to the questions. Operator, can you get us ready for questions from members of the media who are on the call?
At this time, if you'd like to ask a question, please press the star and 1 on your touch-tone phone. You may withdraw your question at any time by pressing the pound key. Once again, if you'd like to ask a question, please press the star and 1 on your touch-tone phone. And we'll take our first question from Julio Ricardo Varela with NPR Latino USA. Please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Buenos dias. I'm hearing all these, what people are doing, but Luis, what exactly is Power for Puerto Rico? Is it a movement? Is it an organization? Is it a plan? Have you reached out to the local Puerto Rican government, Ricardo Roberto? What is it exactly? And where are the next steps?
I'm happy to start and have others join. I opened the call with some of the principles that unite all of us. As Hector eloquently said, just on the Jones Act, we may not all agree on everything, and each organization may have a shorter or larger agenda as it relates to Puerto Rico, what's happening now and its future. But we are all united in some basic principles and make sure that Puerto Rico at all levels has a voice in the United States in what is happening in the island and what we see in the future. Happy to open to others to comment.
Yeah, thank you, Luis, y gracias, Julio, for the question. I think, obviously, this is a coming together, a coalition that has formed over the last couple of weeks. All of us are doing really important work in terms of the relief efforts in Puerto Rico and really thinking long-term in terms of recovery. This coalition feels that we need to make sure that we are a strong voice on behalf of Puerto Rico before this administration and before Congress. Again, the response has been completely inadequate on our federal government in terms of addressing the needs of our folks on the island. Long term, this is going to require tens of billions of dollars. There's been a price tag of $90 billion that has been put out there. We need a Marshall Plan. The systems in Puerto Rico are just crumbling. The healthcare system is crumbling. Certainly the energy grid has crumbled, the infrastructure, et cetera. The only way that gets resolved, we believe, is if the federal government meets its legal and moral responsibility to Puerto Rico, and that's the work that we intend to do, right? We need to continue to put pressure on Congress to do the right thing. This administration, which is challenging on so many different levels, at least get them to continue to focus and support at some levels, but we have a lot of congressional allies. Certainly we have a lot of community partners. This is an amazing coalition, right, of folks from the faith-based community, from the labor community, from the nonprofit community, and so we intend to elevate Puerto Rico as it needs to be elevated in Washington and elsewhere.
This is Ana Maria. The only thing I would add to what Luis and Jose have said is that a very core focus of our work as a coalition is to really make sure that there is a powerful political voice of Puerto Ricans in the states that are able to really carry the kind of the vision and the aspirations of people in the island. I mean, it is not a coincidence that it took the president so long to even acknowledge the level of suffering and the devastation that happened after Hurricane Maria, because the political status of the island makes it so that it is the federal government is basically not accountable to people who live in Puerto Rico. But there are millions of Puerto Ricans in the U.S. who have who are located in strategic places across the country, and who have a tremendous who can be a tremendous potentially powerful force in the politics in the U.S., and whose mission now is to make sure that who are united around making sure that Puerto Rico can recover and that the recovery is just. And so this coalition will focus our efforts on making sure that that powerful voice comes to fruition.
Thank you, Ana Maria. Any other questions?
This is Hector again. I just want to reaffirm that this is a moment that we should all strive to work together to get as much for the people of Puerto Rico and as a greater level of organization in the States. There will be differences among us, right? Some of us supported Promesa, some of us didn't. Our coalition was on record against it. Some of us are more aligned with elected officials and other constituents. Some of us are coming from a different perspective, but we have to really realize that the extent of the damage, the extent of the crisis in Puerto Rico is so incredible, incredibly challenging. We're talking about $100 billion really in damages, depending on the estimates, probably more. We're talking about 10 to 20 years lost of economic development and incredible hardship, that the least that we can do is at least to coordinate our efforts where we know that there are centers of power that need to be influenced to create the conditions for Puerto Rico to be back on its feet. And sometimes we're going to have encounter, different opinions. Sometimes we may clash on strategies, and I think that's all okay. If we remember the most important thing is to strive, for a common purpose in the most vital fronts. So I just wanted to say that because I only learning about the power for Puerto Rico, to be honest. We have, Vamos for Puerto Rico, and, the number 4 is actually perhaps our lucky number in the movement. But we really want to work with everybody to win, a measure of justice for the island that is not going to happen otherwise.
Thank you. Thank you, Hector. Any other questions?
Yes, we do have a question from Catherine Welch with WMSC Public Radio. Please go ahead.
Yes, Congressman Soto, this is Catherine Welch. Can you expand on the challenges you're facing in terms of getting these new arrivals into housing?
is the congressman still on the call?
He's not currently on the call, but he can be back in a few minutes. If you can move on to the next question, we'll come back to you. Thank you.
Right, and in the meantime, I can talk to you a little bit about what's happening in New York, and the congressman can speak to you about Florida, at the Julia de Burgos Cultural Center in East Harlem in New York. A center was set up by the city of New York to attend to the needs of newly arrived Puerto Ricans. It was not clear what the response was going to be. All agencies, including nonprofits, are represented at the center. And quickly, we all realized that the need was much larger than anybody anticipated, with 60 to 75 families showing up to the center in East Harlem every single day. If that is happening in New York every single day, just one center, imagine what's happening in other areas where Puerto Ricans are a vibrant and a big community. When the congressman comes back, we'll retake it. If we have another question, let's go to another question.
We have no other questions at this time. But
Okay.
as a reminder, it is star and one on your touch-tone phone if you would like to ask a question. We do have a follow-up from Julio Ricardo Varela. Please go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Since there's no questions, I just want to ask one more.
Of course.
And I appreciate you gathering this week. Have there been outreaches made to Puerto Rican elected officials in Congress who are not Democrats, like Raul Labrador or the resident commissioner, about this coalition, or are there plans to do that? Or I'm just curious if there's any talk about it.
I think that Hector said it well on behalf of all of us, and José started by saying we've just gotten together in several weeks as a result of the devastation in Puerto Rico. Much more will be done, and certainly we understand that in Congress, both Democrats, we are all represented in terms of our Puerto Ricans, Democrats, but Republicans do hold the power in both houses, and working with them, as our representatives have done, needs to be part of moving forward. The march on the 19th, on November 19th, is a raising of our voices for both Republicans and Democrats to understand that we're here to stay and that we are voters and want action on Puerto Rico.
Gracias. Thank you.
If there's no other question, I will thank everyone for joining. You all get a press release of Power for Puerto Rico, and clearly this is just the first of many activities that we will be doing as a coalition. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Gracias.